The first sign wasn't the argument. It was the check. A thin envelope, cream-colored, my parents' return address printed in the top left corner, postmarked December 18th. I almost didn't open it. I was rushing out the door of my apartment in Pasadena, late for a budget review meeting, coat half on, coffee already cooling in the cup holder of my car. I slid it open standing at the kitchen counter. Inside was a photocopy of a cashier's check for $120,000, payable to my younger sister, not me. I stood there longer than I should have, reading the name twice, then a third time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves if I stared hard enough. They didn't. The name was clear. Lydia Brooks, my sister. 27, recently unemployed, recently engaged, recently moved back into my parents' house after what my mother called a rough season. There was a sticky note attached to the photocopy, just so you're aware. Family transparency is important. Love, Mom. No explanation, no context, no mention of why a six-figure check was circulating days before Christmas. I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and checked my phone calendar. December 20th, 2 days before our annual Christmas dinner. The one I hosted every year because my parents' house was too stressful and my sister's apartment was temporary. The one I paid for. The food, the wine, the decorations, the gifts that said, "From Mom and Dad," on the tags, even though my credit card covered the charges. My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 34 years old. I work as a senior operations analyst for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Glendale. I've been with the company for 9 years. I'm good at my job. Quietly good. The kind of person who fixes problems before they're noticed and never takes credit for it. On paper, my life is stable. Single. No kids. Good salary. Clean credit. No drama. That last part turned out to be an illusion. I drove to work in silence, the envelope on the passenger seat like a physical weight. All morning, numbers blurred together. Inventory projections, vendor timelines, a promotion discussion scheduled for January that my manager, Elaine Porter, had hinted strongly was mine. I should have been thinking about that. Instead, I kept seeing my sister's name, printed in black ink. At lunch, I finally called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, breathless, the sound of Christmas music faint in the background. "Hannah, honey, I was just wrapping presents." "I got your envelope," I said. A pause. Not surprise. Calculation. "Oh, good," she replied. "I didn't want you hearing about it secondhand." "Hearing about what?" "The loan," she said lightly. "For Lydia." I waited. "She and Mark are trying to get a small place before the wedding," my mother continued. "You know how hard things are for young couples. We thought it was only fair to help." "Only fair." "And the money?" I asked. "Well," she said, as if explaining something obvious to a child, "your father and I are using the equity line. It's temporary. Lydia will pay it back eventually." I looked out the office window at the parking lot below. "Why did you send me a copy of the check?" I asked. Another pause. This one shorter. "Because you handle finances so well," she said. "And because I didn't want you feeling excluded." Excluded. I wasn't included," I said calmly. "Well," my mother replied, her tone shifting slightly, "you don't need it, Hannah. You're established. Lydia needs a start." A start. I thought of my own start. Student loans I paid off alone. The first apartment I furnished with thrift store finds. The years I sent money home when my father's consulting work slowed, and my mother didn't want to dip into savings. I said, "None of that." "Are you helping me with anything this year?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, you know this isn't about keeping score." But somehow, it always was. We hung up politely. No argument, no raised voices. Just the familiar ache of being reasonable while something unreasonable slid into place. That night, my sister called. "Hannah!" Lydia's voice was bright, rehearsed. "Mom said she told you." "Told me what?" "About the loan," she said. "I hope it's okay. I know it's a lot, but Mark's parents can't help, and you're always so supportive." Supportive? "I didn't know there was a conversation," I said. "Well," Lydia replied, "Mom said you'd understand. You always do." After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, the Christmas lights on my balcony blinking steadily, and felt something unfamiliar take shape beneath the surface of my usual restraint. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. Because suddenly, A dozen small moments rearranged themselves into a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. The birthday my parents forgot, but remembered Lydia's engagement party. The way my mother referred to my income as comfortable and my sister's as potential. The way my role in the family was always assumed, never discussed. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements, not to calculate what I'd given. I already knew it was a lot. I was looking for something else. Proof. Because if there was one thing my job had taught me, it was this. Systems don't run on feelings. They run. And once you start reading those records honestly, there's no going back. By the time I closed my laptop, it was after midnight. Christmas was 4 days away. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer planning a dinner. I was preparing for a reckoning. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was emotional, but because my mind had shifted into a familiar mode. The same one it used at work when something didn't reconcile. When the numbers didn't line up, an instinct said the error wasn't random. By 6 a.m, I was already at my desk, with a legal pad and my laptop open. I wasn't looking for betrayal. I was looking for patterns. I started with the obvious. Transfers to my parents' joint account, monthly amounts that had once been labeled temporary and somehow became routine. Small enough individually to ignore, large enough together to matter. Then I pulled up credit card statements, charges I remembered. Catering deposits, florists, home improvement stores near my parents' address. A rental car in Palm Springs I'd been told was for a church retreat. Airline tickets bought in Lydia's name the same week she told me she was staying home to save money. I wrote nothing down yet. I just watched the timeline form. 8 years. That's how long I've been quietly subsidizing a family that spoke about fairness as if it were something that happened naturally, without intervention. At 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. Elaine, my manager. Can you stop by my office when you get in? Normally, that message would have triggered a spike of anxiety. Today, it barely registered. I closed my laptop, grabbed my bag, and drove to work with the calm focus of someone who had already accepted a difficult truth. Elaine's office door was open. She gestured for me to sit. I wanted to check in, she said. You've been carrying a lot lately. I waited. There's a restructuring coming in Q1, she continued. One that affects leadership roles. I wanted to know if you're still interested. I nodded. Yes, she smiled. Good, because I'm recommending you. The words landed softly. Normally, I would have felt proud, relieved, validated. Instead, I felt something else. Distance. Not from the job. From the idea that external stability could compensate for private imbalance. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and opened my calendar. Christmas dinner, 2 days away. I stared at the block of time and felt, for the first time, the freedom of not filling it. I sent, "Hey everyone, I won't be hosting Christmas dinner this year. Please make other plans." No explanation. No apology. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. My mother replied first. What do you mean? Then Lydia. Is everything okay? Then my father, Martin, who rarely texted. We already told people, Hannah. I didn't respond. At lunch, my mother called. I answered this time. You can't just cancel, she said, skipping any pretense of concern. Your aunt is flying in. The caterer's booked. I didn't book a caterer, I said calmly. Silence. Well, you usually, she began. I'm not this year. Hannah, she said, her voice tightening. This feels punitive. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied. I'm opting out. Of Christmas? She scoffed. Of assuming responsibility without discussion. She exhaled sharply. Is this about the loan? It's about transparency, I said. Another pause. Then, colder. You're being dramatic. There it was. The familiar dismissal. I'll see you after the holidays, I said, and hung up before she could respond. That night, Lydia showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in the doorway, wearing the same oversized coat she'd borrowed from me years ago and never returned. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. She sat on my couch, legs crossed, eyes scanning the room the way she always did, as if mentally inventorying what she could ask for next. Mom's upset, she said. I know. She thinks you're making a point. I am. Lydia frowned. About what? I sat across from her. How much do you think I've contributed to this family over the years? She blinked. I don't know. You're good with money. That wasn't an answer. I paid for your college textbooks, I said. Your car insurance for 3 years. The deposit on your first apartment. Did you know that? She shifted. Mom said you offered. I didn't know I was offering indefinitely. She sighed. Why are you keeping score now? I'm not, I said. I'm reconciling. That word confused her. Hannah, she said softly, you've always been the responsible one. It makes sense that you help. And you? I asked. She smiled faintly. I'm the creative one. I nodded slowly. That was the moment it clicked. Not as resentment, as realization. They weren't taking advantage of me accidentally. They were assigning roles. And I was the balance sheet. Lydia stood to leave. You're really not hosting? She asked again. No. She hesitated at the door. Mom says if you don't show up, people will talk. I'm okay with that. She left without another word. Later that night, I opened my laptop again. This time, I created a spreadsheet. Not emotional, not accusatory, just dates, amounts, notes. By the time I finished, the total sat at the bottom of the page like a quiet indictment. $298,000. I stared at the number until it stopped feeling abstract. This wasn't generosity. It was extraction, dressed as family loyalty. And the check to Lydia wasn't a gift. It was a signal, one I was never meant to question. But I had. And the moment I did, everything began to shift. Because once you see your place in a system clearly, you have only two choices: remain useful or become dangerous. I closed my laptop, already knowing which one I was about to be. The first consequence of stepping out of line was silence. Not the peaceful kind, the pointed kind. No good morning texts from my mother. No check-in calls from my father. No passive emojis from Lydia, pretending nothing was wrong. The family group chat, usually buzzing with logistical nonsense and half-hearted jokes, went completely still. I noticed it the way you notice pressure dropping in a room. Subtle, but unmistakable. At work, everything continued as normal. Meetings, deadlines. Elaine pulled me into another quick conversation about Q1 planning, already treating me like someone whose presence mattered. That contrast was jarring. I was respected in a system where expectations were explicit, rewarded, and documented. At home, I was only valuable when I anticipated needs without being asked. Wednesday night, 2 days before Christmas, my father called. Martin Brooks was not a man who enjoyed conflict. He preferred it softened, filtered through my mother, reshaped into something polite and reasonable. When he called directly, it meant my refusal had disrupted more than plans. Hannah, he said, voice measured, your mother's very upset. I know. She feels blindsided. I didn't hide anything. He sighed. That loan to Lydia. It wasn't meant to cause this. What was it meant to do? I asked. Silence on the line. Help her get settled, he said finally. She's starting a family. And I'm not? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. You're independent, he said. You've always been. There it was again. Independence as justification. Competence as disqualification. I didn't opt out of being supported, I said. I was never offered it. Hannah, he warned gently, you're turning this into something it doesn't need to be. That phrase landed like a door closing. I'm not turning it into anything, I replied. I'm seeing it clearly. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. Instead, he said, your mother thinks you're pulling away. I almost laughed. Pulling away implied movement from a shared center. I'd been orbiting for years. We ended the call politely. That's how our family handled discomfort. We wrapped it in courtesy and let it harden into resentment later. Christmas morning came quietly. No rushing, no grocery lists, no table settings. I woke up in my apartment, made coffee, and sat by the window watching neighbors carry wrapped boxes to their cars. Families laughing, kids tugging at coats. Normal rituals I'd helped orchestrate for others, without ever questioning why I was always the one holding the clipboard. At 10:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my Aunt Cheryl. Are you okay? Your mom says you're overwhelmed. I didn't reply. At noon, another message. Your sister's in tears. This isn't like you. That one stung. Not because it was unfair, but because it was accurate. It wasn't like me. That was the point. At 2 p.m., Lydia called again. I answered. Hannah, she said immediately, her voice shaky. Mom's beside herself. The whole family's asking where you are. I'm home, I said. This feels extreme, she said. Over a loan? It's not about the loan, I replied. It's about the assumption. What assumption? That I'll always cover the gap, she sniffed. You make it sound so cold. No, I said. I'm making it accurate. She was quiet for a moment. Mom says you're jealous, Lydia said carefully. That you're upset because I'm getting married. I closed my eyes. I paid for your engagement party, I said. I'm not jealous. She didn't respond. I need to ask you something, I continued. Did you know they were taking out that equity line before they told me? A pause. Yes, she said. And you didn't think to mention it? I thought you'd be fine with it, she replied. You always are. There it was again. The role, the reliable one, the flexible one, the one whose consent was assumed rather than requested. I'm not fine with it, I said. She exhaled sharply. So what now? Are you cutting us off? I considered the question. No, I said. I'm stopping. She didn't understand the difference. After we hung up, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not guilt, finality. That evening, I opened my laptop and emailed a lawyer. Her name was Naomi Feldman. I'd met her years earlier at a professional seminar on contract risk. We'd exchanged cards and never spoken again. My email was brief. I need advice regarding long-term financial contributions to family members and potential exposure. Can we talk? She replied within the hour. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The next morning, I sat in Naomi's office while she reviewed my spreadsheet. She didn't react emotionally. That was a relief. This is significant, she said. Not just the amount, the duration, the expectation. What kind of expectation? I asked. That you'll continue, she replied. Which becomes a problem when you stop. I'm not obligated, I said. No, she agreed. But people who benefit from informal systems often behave as if you are. She looked at me directly. The question isn't whether you owe them, she said. It's how they'll respond when they realize you're serious. I thought of the check, the silence, the carefully seeded narrative about me being overwhelmed. What do I need to protect? I asked. Your assets, she said. Your reputation, your future income. She paused. And your boundaries. I left her office with a list. Practical steps, documentation, no confrontation required. That afternoon, I received an email from my mother. We need to talk, as a family. This distance is unhealthy. I didn't reply, because distance was the first healthy thing that had happened in years. And I was done explaining why. The shift had already begun. They just didn't realize yet how far it would go. The family meeting happened without me. I found out the same way I'd learned about the check. Indirectly, casually, as if my absence were a scheduling issue, not a statement. My Aunt Cheryl texted on December 27th. We all talked last night. Your mom's worried you're isolating yourself. All. That word did more work than the sentence around it. I didn't ask who was there. I already knew. My parents, Lydia, probably Mark. Maybe my grandmother Ruth, sitting quietly in the corner, listening without interrupting, the way she always had. The meeting wasn't about understanding me. It was about managing me. At work, the new year began quickly. Budgets, forecasts, a major vendor issue that landed on my desk because Elaine trusted me to handle things without drama. I stayed late 2 nights in a row, not because I had to, but because I wanted the clarity that came from being competent in a space where effort led to outcomes. On Wednesday afternoon, Elaine closed my office door behind her. I wanted you to hear this from me, she said. HR received an odd call. I waited. She didn't identify herself at first, Elaine continued. Just said she was a concerned family member. Claimed you were under a lot of stress and might be making impulsive financial decisions. My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed even. My mother. Elaine nodded. I assumed as much. I told HR it wasn't appropriate. Thank you. She studied me for a moment. Is everything okay? Yes, I said. And I have documentation if this escalates. That seemed to settle her. Respect, not pity. When I got back to my desk, my hands were shaking slightly. Not fear, rage, compressed into something cold and usable. They'd crossed a line, not emotionally, strategically. That night, I called Naomi. They contacted my workplace, I said. Her tone shifted immediately. That's important. I thought so. It's an attempt to undermine your credibility, she said. And it gives us leverage. I don't want to escalate, I said. You're not, she replied. They are. She drafted a letter while we were on the phone. Formal, restrained, addressed to my parents. All communication regarding finances, personal decisions, or employment was to go through counsel. Any further attempts to contact my employer would be documented. No accusations, no threats. Just a boundary, with teeth. We sent it certified the next morning. The response was immediate. My father called first. "Hannah," he said, his voice strained. "This is unnecessary." "What part?" I asked. "The lawyer," he said. "This makes it look adversarial." "It became adversarial when you called my job." "That was your mother," he said quickly. "She was worried." "I'm worried too," I replied, "about how easily you justify that." He sighed. "We're family. Families don't need to protect themselves from each other," I said. Silence. That afternoon, Lydia texted, "Mom's devastated. She says you've turned cold." I stared at the word, cold, as if calm were cruelty. As if refusing to subsidize someone else's choices were a moral failure. I typed, then deleted, then typed again. "I'm not cold. I'm clear." She didn't reply. 2 days later, Naomi forwarded me an email. It was from a financial advisor I'd never met, asking to confirm my involvement in a family liquidity plan. My name was listed as a contributor. I read the message twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was finally obvious. They hadn't just been using my money. They'd been planning around it, assuming it would always be there, factoring it into decisions I was never invited to discuss, presenting it to outsiders as a given. I forwarded the email to Naomi. Her response was blunt. "They're treating you like an asset, not a person." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my spreadsheet again. This time, I added a column, exposure. If I stopped completely, what could they claim? What had they implied? What narratives were already in motion? The answer unsettled me more than I'd thought. On Saturday, my grandmother Ruth called. She rarely did. She was 92 and preferred letters. When she called, it meant she'd decided silence was no longer sufficient. "Hannah," she said, "your mother's very upset." "I know. She says you're threatening the family." I closed my eyes. "Am I?" I asked. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "No. You're threatening the arrangement." There it was. "I should have said something sooner," she added. "But your mother is persuasive." "I don't need you to take sides," I said. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm observing." After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the years I'd spent earning approval that was never freely given. Relief that someone else finally saw the structure I'd been trapped in. That night, Naomi emailed me again. "We need to talk about asset separation. And about what happens if they try to formalize expectations retroactively." That sentence stayed with me. Formalize expectations. They were already moving pieces. Quietly. Confidently. Assuming I'd fold. They were wrong. Because I wasn't angry enough to lash out. I was calm enough to act. And the next step wouldn't be emotional. It would be permanent. The email arrived on a Monday morning, buried between vendor updates and calendar reminders. If I'd opened it 5 minutes later, I might have missed it entirely. Subject: Brooks Family Planning. Follow-up. The sender was the same financial advisory firm Naomi had mentioned. The body of the email was brief, professional, and very clearly not meant for me. "Just confirming we'll proceed with the updated assumptions discussed. Once the equity line clears, we'll restructure accordingly. Let me know if Hannah's contribution remains stable for Q2. I read it twice. Then the third time. There it was. Not implied, not hinted at. Assumed my contribution. I forwarded it to Naomi without adding a single word. She called within 3 minutes. "They're treating your income like a fixed asset," she said. "That's a problem." "How big of a problem?" I asked. "Big enough that we need to shut this down now," she replied, "before it gets formalized into something harder to unwind." That afternoon, I left work early and met her at her office. She'd already printed everything. Emails, statements, notes she'd taken during our last conversation. "This," she said, tapping the email, "shows reliance. And reliance without consent is exposure. Not for you, for them." I leaned back in the chair. "So what's the move?" "We clarify. In writing. And we make it unmistakable." She drafted a notice while I watched. It stated plainly that I had never agreed to be part of any family financial plan, that any past contributions were voluntary and had ceased, and that no assumption should be made about future support. It wasn't aggressive, it was precise. "And then?" I asked. "And then we wait," Naomi said. "Their response will tell us everything." The notice went out certified that evening. By the next morning, my phone was ringing. My mother. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Lydia. I didn't answer any of them. At work, Elaine stopped by my desk. "HR flagged another call," she said quietly. "This time from a financial firm, asking to verify your income." My stomach tightened. "I told them no information would be shared," she continued. "But I wanted you to know." "Thank you," I said. When she left, I sat still for a long moment. They weren't panicking yet. They were scrambling. That evening, my father showed up at my apartment, unannounced. Again. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Hannah," he said, lowering his voice. "This is getting out of hand." "You've said that before," I replied. "We didn't realize how serious you were," he continued. "We thought you just needed space." "Space doesn't stop people from planning with my money," I said. He flinched. "That email," he said. "It wasn't supposed to go to you." "That's the problem," I replied. "None of it was." He sighed heavily. "Your mother feels betrayed." I looked at him carefully. "By what?" "That you'd cut us off without warning." "I warned you for years," I said. "You just didn't believe me." He shook his head. "You've always been there." "And that made you comfortable," I said, "not entitled." He didn't argue. He just looked tired. "Can we fix this?" he asked. I considered the question. "Yes," I said. "By accepting that my finances are no longer part of your planning." He nodded slowly. "I'll talk to your mother." "I hope you do," I replied. "But I'm not waiting for her permission." He left without another word. The response from the advisory firm came 2 days later. An apology. Carefully worded. They claimed misunderstanding. Said they'd remove my name from all projections and cease contact. Naomi read it and smiled faintly. "They're backing away," she said. "Which means someone told them to." "Who?" I asked. "Either your parents," she said, "or their lawyer." That answered itself on Friday. A letter arrived at my apartment, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single page. "Hannah, we need to reset. The stress you're causing is unnecessary. Come to dinner Sunday and we'll talk like adults. No lawyers. Love, Mom." I read it once. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I spent Sunday afternoon doing something I'd postponed for years. I met with a financial planner, not for my family, for me. We talked about savings, about investments, about what my life could look like without the constant outflow I'd normalized. The numbers were sobering and hopeful. On my way home, I stopped by a cafe and watched people come and go. Couples, families, groups of friends. Everyone carrying their own systems, their own assumptions. I realized then how invisible my role had been, not because it was small, but because it was convenient. That night, Naomi emailed me again. "They're quiet," she wrote, which means they're recalculating. I stared at the screen, feeling something settle in my chest. They were running out of moves, and I was no longer waiting to see what they'd do next. I was deciding what I'd do instead. The shift wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. And somewhere, in a house I no longer paid for, they were beginning to understand that the balance had changed for good. The first holiday, without my money, was Valentine's Day. Not because it mattered to me, but because it mattered to them. Lydia had always treated holidays like leverage points. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. Any moment that came preloaded with expectations was an opportunity to remind me how much easier things were when I helped. This time, the reminder came dressed as urgency. She called on a Friday afternoon, voice tight, breathless, in that way that always suggested a problem she wanted me to solve. "Hannah, are you busy?" "Yes," I said. "Oh, it'll just take a minute," she replied. "Mark's credit card got declined, and the venue's holding the florist deposit. It's embarrassing. I thought maybe you could." "No," I said. There was a long pause. "No?" she repeated, as if the word were unfamiliar. "I'm not available for that," I said. "You don't even know how much it is," she said quickly. "I don't need to." Her voice shifted, the brightness draining out of it. "Mom said you'd do this, that you'd punish me for things that aren't my fault." "I'm not punishing you," I replied. "I'm not participating." "That's the same thing," she snapped. "No, I said calmly. It just feels the same when you're used to access. She hung up without saying goodbye. That night, my mother posted photos online. A carefully staged dinner. Candles. Flowers. A caption about family sticking together when things get hard. The comments rolled in. Hearts, support, sympathy. I wasn't tagged. I didn't need to be. The message wasn't for me. It was about me. At work, things accelerated. Elaine asked me to join a cross-functional task force. Then HR scheduled a formal review for March, the kind that preceded promotions. My calendar filled up. My days felt structured in a way they hadn't before, no longer punctuated by family emergencies that derailed my focus. I noticed something else, too. I wasn't tired all the time. The low-grade exhaustion I'd normalized began to lift. I slept better, ate better, thought more clearly. The absence of constant obligation freed up more than money. It freed up space. On Wednesday, Naomi called with an update. They've stopped, she said. Stopped what? Trying to formalize anything. The advisory firm closed the file. No further inquiries. I exhaled slowly. That's good, I said. It is, she agreed. But it doesn't mean they're done. I know. That weekend, my grandmother Ruth invited me to lunch. Just me. No agenda, no group, no mediator. We met at a small cafe near her assisted living complex. She ordered soup and half a sandwich, exactly as she always did. You look lighter, she said, studying me. I feel quieter, I replied. She nodded. Your mother hasn't been quiet. I didn't expect her to be. She says you've changed, Ruth continued. That success has made you selfish. I smiled faintly. Has it? Ruth stirred her soup thoughtfully. No, it's made you visible. There's a difference. She looked at me directly. She never expected you to stop, she said. None of them did. I know. They thought holidays would bring you back, Ruth continued. That guilt would do the work for them. And when it didn't, they didn't know what to do, she said simply. We ate in silence for a moment. Then she said something that caught me off guard. There's paperwork your mother doesn't know about. I looked up. What kind of paperwork? Not yours, she said. Mine. I didn't ask more. I didn't need to. I understood the subtext. Some systems outlast the people who think they control them. That night, my father called. Not angry, not pleading. Resign. Hannah, he said. Your mother's struggling. I know. She didn't think it would go this far, he said. She thought you'd come back after the holidays. And now? He hesitated. Now she's realizing she built everything assuming you'd always be there. That's not my responsibility, I said gently. I know, he replied. I just wanted you to hear that. We ended the call quietly. No resolution. But something important had shifted. They weren't pushing anymore. They were adjusting. And that told me everything. Because people only adjust when they understand a boundary isn't temporary. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed my finances again. Not out of fear, but curiosity. I reran projections without family obligations. The result wasn't luxury. It was stability, choice. I booked a short trip for myself in April. Nothing extravagant, just a place I'd always wanted to see and never prioritized. When the confirmation email came through, I smiled. Not because of where I was going, because of why. I wasn't escaping. I was investing in a life that didn't require justification. Somewhere across town, my family was learning how expensive assumptions could be. And for the first time, I wasn't available to cover the cost. The invitation arrived in early March. Not by email, not by text. By mail, heavy cardstock, cream with gold trim. My full name printed in an elegant serif font that suggested formality, forgiveness, and expectation all at once. Lydia Brooks and Mark Ellis request the honor of your presence. I set it on the kitchen counter and didn't touch it again for 3 days. Not because I was undecided, because I was waiting to see what followed. It came on the 4th day. My mother called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her tone was measured, careful, the way she sounded when she wanted something but didn't want to appear desperate. Hannah, I assume you received the invitation. This is an important moment for your sister. I hope you won't let misunderstandings interfere with family milestones. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a reminder of my assigned role. I listened once. then deleted it. At work, Elaine stopped by my desk later that afternoon. "We finalized the leadership changes," she said. "You'll be stepping into the regional operations role next quarter." I blinked. "That's official?" "It is," she said, smiling. "Congratulations." The timing felt almost unreal. One system was promoting me because I'd earned it. Another was summoning me because they needed me. That contrast clarified everything. 2 days later, Lydia called. This time, I answered. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, tentative. "Did you get the invite?" "Yes. I just wanted to say," she continued. "It would mean a lot to me if you came." I waited. And, she added quickly, "Things are a little tight with the wedding budget. The venue changed their payment schedule, and Mom's stress." There it was. Not a request. A re-entry attempt. "I'm happy for you," I said, "but I'm not contributing financially." Silence. "You're my sister," she said finally. "It's my wedding." "I know," I replied, "and this is my boundary." She exhaled sharply. "So you'll come, but you won't help?" "I haven't said I'm coming," I said. Her voice hardened. "Mom says if you don't show up, people will talk." "They already are," I replied. "You're really doing this," she said, making everything harder. "No," I said calmly. "I'm letting it be what it is." She hung up. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the invitation in front of me and realized something important. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a test. If I attended, it would signal reconciliation without accountability. If I didn't, it would confirm their narrative that I was difficult, ungrateful, cold. Either way, they planned to use my presence. The next morning, I emailed Naomi. "If I attend the wedding, does it expose me legally in any way?" Her response was immediate. "Only if you resume financial involvement or allow assumptions to be made. Attendance alone isn't consent. Silence afterward can be." I read that sentence twice. Silence afterward can. I RSVP'd no. No explanation. No note. Just a decline. The backlash was swift. My Aunt Cheryl texted, "You'll regret missing this." My cousin Megan sent a message. "Mom's heartbroken." My father called twice and left a voicemail. "This is tearing your mother apart," he said. "Is that what you want?" I didn't respond. The wedding happened on a Saturday in April. I spent that weekend in Santa Fe. I hiked in the morning, ate alone in the evenings, slept without interruption. On the day of the ceremony, I left my phone in the hotel room and walked the city until my legs ached. When I turned my phone back on that night, there were 17 missed calls. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails. On Monday morning, something unexpected happened. My grandmother Ruth called. "She cried at the wedding," Ruth said without preamble. "Not the good kind." I said nothing. "She told people you were overwhelmed," Ruth continued, "that you couldn't handle family pressure." I almost laughed. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I said you were busy building a life," Ruth replied. "And that pressure is only pressure when you refuse to carry it." That night, I received an email from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Mark, my new brother-in-law. "Hannah, I don't know what's going on, but I think there's been a misunderstanding about money and expectations. Lydia's really upset. If you're open to talking, maybe we can clear things up." I stared at the message. He thought this was a misunderstanding. That assumption told me everything about the story he'd been given. I replied with one sentence. "There's no misunderstanding. There's a boundary." He never responded. 2 weeks later, Naomi called. "There's movement," she said. "What kind?" "Your parents are liquidating assets," she replied. "Small ones. Accounts they hadn't touched before." I closed my eyes. "They're adjusting," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "But they're also realizing something." "What?" "That the leverage they thought they had doesn't exist anymore." That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights stretching out below me, and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Not relief. Confidence. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't explained myself into exhaustion. I hadn't begged to be understood. I'd simply stopped participating, and that was enough to shift the entire structure. Because when the person who holds the system together steps away, the system doesn't negotiate. It reveals itself. And what my family revealed, without my presence to stabilize them, wasn't strength. It was dependence. The wedding had come and gone. The test had been administered, and I hadn't failed. I'd refused to sit for it at all. What came next wouldn't be emotional. It would be consequential, because now the truth was no longer private. It was starting to circulate. And once that happens, there's no going back. I didn't find out directly. I never do. The truth always seems to surface sideways, carried in by someone who doesn't realize how dangerous it is. In this case, it was Elaine. She closed my office door on a Thursday afternoon and didn't sit down. "Have you ever worked with a firm called Calder and Rowe?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," she hesitated. "They called payroll this morning, asked to verify your employment history and compensation. Claimed they were assisting with family estate documentation." My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Did you provide anything?" "No," she said. "HR declined and flagged it." "But Hannah, this is the second time." I nodded. "I'm aware." She studied my face. "Do you want me to escalate this?" "Yes," I said. "And please document everything." When she left, I didn't move for a long moment. They were doing it again, trying to anchor my income to something I hadn't agreed to, trying to fold me back into a structure that only worked when I didn't question it. I called Naomi immediately. "That's not accidental," she said, after I explained. "They're attempting to prepare an estate or trust document that references your financial role." "Without my consent," I said. "Which is why we need to act now," she replied, "before anything gets filed." That evening, I sat across from her as she pulled records, property filings, equity lines, advisor correspondence she'd obtained through formal requests. It took less than an hour to find it, a draft, not finalized, not signed, but real. Brooks Family Continuity Trust, preliminary outline. My name appeared twice, once as a contributor, once as a contingent stabilizing party. I stared at the page. "They planned this," I said quietly. "Yes," Naomi replied. "And they assumed you'd never see it." The document described a future in which my parents downsized, Lydia and Mark assumed the primary residence, and I continued contributing supportive funds to ensure liquidity during the transition. It was written like a certainty, like I was a resource, not a person. "They were never going to ask," I said. "No," Naomi agreed. "They were going to normalize it." She slid another page across the desk. "And this is the most important part. A note from the drafting attorney. Hannah's cooperation assumed based on historical behavior." I laughed once. Short, sharp. "Historical behavior," I repeated. Years of silence, reduced to a data point. Naomi looked at me carefully. "This gives us leverage." "I don't want leverage," I said. "I want separation." "You'll get both," she replied. The next morning, Naomi filed a formal objection. Not a lawsuit. A record. A sworn declaration stating I had no knowledge of, nor consented to, any estate planning documents referencing my income, assets, or future support. She sent copies to Calder and Rowe, to the financial advisory firm, to my parents. By noon, my phone was ringing. I didn't answer. My mother left a voicemail, her voice tight with forced calm. "Hannah, this is getting out of hand. Lawyers don't belong in families." I saved it. Then, another message. "We were trying to protect everyone." I saved that too. At 4:17 p.m., my father called. "Hannah," he said, exhausted. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm not doing anything," I replied. "I'm stopping you." He was quiet. "That document," he said slowly. "It was just a draft." "Drafts show intent," I replied. "We assumed." "That's the problem," I cut in. "You assumed access." He sighed. "Your mother's scared." "She should be," I said. "She built a future that depended on my silence." That night, Lydia texted. I saw the preview and didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. That I was overreacting. That I was ruining things. That I didn't understand how families work. But I did understand. Better than ever. Families that function on unspoken obligations collapse when those obligations are named. And once named, they can't be undone. On Sunday afternoon, my grandmother Ruth asked me to visit. She sat in her chair, hands folded, eyes sharp. "They showed me the paperwork," she said. I nodded. I figured they would. "They said it was harmless," she continued. "That you wouldn't mind." "And what did you say?" She smiled faintly. "I said if it was harmless, they wouldn't need to hide it." I felt something loosen in my chest. "They're worried," she added. "Not about you leaving. About what happens if you don't come back." I stood to leave. At the door, she said quietly, "You're doing the right thing." That night, Naomi emailed me one last update. "The trust draft has been withdrawn," she wrote. "No filings, no references. They've been warned." I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. It was done. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly dismantled. They'd tried to make my future part of their plan. I'd removed it. And once your name is taken off a document like that, it doesn't go back on without permission. They'd lost more than money. They'd lost certainty. And for the first time, they understood exactly how much power they'd been borrowing from me all along. Chapter 9 wouldn't be about discovery. It would be about consequences, because systems don't like being exposed. They retaliate, and I was ready. The retaliation didn't come through lawyers. It came through people. On Monday morning, I woke up to 3 messages from numbers I didn't have saved. Cousins, old family friends, a woman from my mother's church who used to hug me too tightly and ask when I was finally going to settle down. The tone was consistent. Concerned, confused, disappointed. "Your mom is really struggling. Families don't handle things this way. We're worried about you." I read them without responding. At work, Elaine forwarded me an internal note from HR. Not an incident, not a warning, a record. It stated that multiple third-party inquiries had been made regarding my employment and compensation. All denied, all documented. I thanked her and saved the file. By Tuesday afternoon, the narrative had fully formed. I wasn't principled. I was unstable. I wasn't setting boundaries. I was spiraling. My mother had always been good at this part. She didn't accuse directly, she implied. Let other people draw conclusions that benefited her, without ever having to state them outright. The phone rang while I was making dinner. It was my Aunt Cheryl. "Hannah," she said, skipping pleasantries. "What's going on with you?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Well," she continued, "your mother says you've been acting erratically. Bringing in lawyers, making threats." "I haven't threatened anyone," I said. "She says you're trying to take things away." I smiled faintly. "I'm stopping them from taking from me." "That's not how it looks," Cheryl replied. "I'm aware," I said. She paused. "You know how this will affect the family." "Yes," I said. "That's why it's happening now." She didn't like that answer. Neither did the others. By Thursday, I'd been quietly removed from a family email chain about Easter plans. Lydia posted photos online of dress fittings and bridal showers, with captions about support systems and gratitude. I wasn't tagged. Again. This time, I didn't feel the familiar ache. I felt relief, because something else had started to happen. People began asking questions, not to me, to each other. A cousin asked why my parents needed so much help if they were downsizing. A family friend wondered aloud why my income kept coming up in conversations when I wasn't present. Someone noticed that my mother's version of events changed slightly each time she told it. That's the problem with managing narratives. They require maintenance, and she was losing control of the details. The breaking point came on Friday night. My grandmother Ruth called. "They're panicking," she said. "About what?" "About the house," she replied. They were counting on the trust to stabilize things. Without it, the numbers don't work. I closed my eyes. "They thought they could force me back in," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "By making you look unreasonable." "And now?" "Now," she said carefully, "they're realizing you don't need them the way they need you." That realization travels fast. On Saturday morning, I received an email from a mediator. Neutral tone. Neutral language. "Your family has requested a facilitated conversation to resolve misunderstandings and restore harmony." I forwarded it to Naomi. Her reply was immediate. "This is an attempt to regain access, not resolution." "I know," I wrote back. She called anyway. "They're trying to reset the power dynamic," she said. "Put you back in a room where emotion replaces documentation." "I'm not going," I said. "Good," she replied. "Then we prepare." "For what?" "For escalation," she said. "Because when people lose control quietly, they often try one last public move." She was right. That move came sooner than expected. Sunday afternoon, my mother posted a long message online, carefully worded, vague, emotional, about the pain of watching a child pull away, about how success can change people, about respecting family elders and traditions. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments flooded in. Support, sympathy, concern. A few people asked questions. She didn't answer those. I closed the app. An hour later, my phone rang. My father. "Hannah," he said, his voice low, urgent. "This has gone far enough." "What has?" I asked. "Your mother's reputation is being damaged," he said. I almost laughed. "She did that herself," I replied. "She's not well," he continued. "This stress is affecting her health." "That's unfortunate," I said, "but it's not leverage." He exhaled sharply. "You're cold." "No," I said. "I'm clear." Silence. Then, quietly, "What do you want?" It was the first honest question I'd heard in months. "I want my name removed from your plans," I said. "From your finances, from your expectations. And then, I continued, you live with the choices you made, without my help." He didn't argue. He didn't promise anything. But something in his silence told me he understood this wasn't a phase. It was an ending. That night, Naomi sent me one final message. "They're done," she wrote. "No more drafts. No more inquiries. They've disengaged." I sat at my kitchen table long after reading it, not celebrating, not grieving, just sitting with the reality that something permanent had occurred. They'd tried to turn the story against me. It hadn't worked, because the truth didn't need defending. It just needed to be documented. And now, it was. The next chapter wouldn't involve them trying to pull me back. It would involve what happens when the system they built finally collapses under its own weight. And I no longer had to stand beneath it. The sale notice went up on a Wednesday morning, not online, not public. On the front lawn, a simple white sign staked into the grass of the house I'd grown up in. The one my mother still referred to as ours, even though the mortgage had been refinanced 3 times, and the equity line quietly drained. Ruth told me. "They listed the house," she said over the phone. Quietly. No announcement. No explanation. I closed my eyes. "They don't have a choice anymore," I said. "No," she agreed. "They don't." Without my income stabilizing their projections, the numbers no longer worked. The equity line had ballooned. The wedding costs hadn't disappeared just because I refused to cover them. And the trust they'd planned to rely on never materialized. They were out of options. 2 days later, my father called. This time, his voice sounded older. "We're downsizing," he said. I heard. "We didn't want you to find out this way," he added. I didn't respond. "The market isn't great," he continued, "but we need liquidity." "For what?" I asked. There was a pause. "To stay afloat," he admitted. There it was. No longer coded language. No moral framing. Just math. "And Lydia?" I asked. "She and Mark moved in temporarily," he said, "until things stabilize." I pictured it clearly. My parents' house, becoming the landing pad for the same choices I'd been asked to finance for years. "I won't be involved," I said calmly. "I know," he replied. "I wasn't asking." That was new. The listing price dropped after 10 days. Then again, the buyers hesitated. The inspection revealed issues my parents had deferred fixing, assuming there would always be time. Or money. I heard about it through Ruth, then through a cousin who couldn't help gossiping. By the end of the month, the house was under contract, below asking. Significantly, the closing date was set for May. That was when my mother called. Not to argue, to inform. "We'll need somewhere to store some things," she said. "Just temporarily." "No," I replied. She inhaled sharply. "Hannah, don't do this." "I already have," I said. "This isn't about money," she insisted. "It's about family." "It's always been about money," I replied. "You just didn't like calling it that." Her voice cracked. "You're enjoying this." I wasn't. But I wasn't saving her, either. "No," I said quietly. "I'm accepting it." She hung up. The closing happened on a Friday. I was at work when Ruth called again. "It's done," she said. "They signed this morning." I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat at my desk and stared at the screen, feeling something unexpected. Not relief. Release. That house had never really been a home. It had been collateral, a symbol of stability built on assumptions that no longer existed. That evening, Naomi emailed me. "They're liquidating," she wrote. "Accounts, assets, anything not nailed down." I closed my laptop. They were dismantling the life they'd built around my silence. Not because I forced them, because it was never sustainable to begin with. 2 weeks later, Lydia emailed. Not a call, not a text. An email. Short. "We had to cancel the honeymoon. Things are tighter than we thought." No accusation. No request, just information. I didn't reply, because the moment had passed where my response would have changed anything. On Sunday afternoon, Ruth invited me over. The house smelled like dust and old paper. Boxes lined the hallway. "They're moving next week," she said. "Where?" "An apartment near the freeway," she replied. "Temporary." Temporary had become a theme. We sat quietly for a moment. "They thought you'd step in," Ruth said. "At the end. Like always." "I know. And when you didn't?" She looked at me. "They realized you weren't being difficult," she said. "You were being final." That word settled in my chest. Final. That night, my mother sent one last message. "You've changed everything." I typed a response, then deleted it, then wrote something else. I didn't change anything. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. I didn't send it. Some truths don't need delivery. They arrive on their own. The house was gone. The plan was dead. The system had collapsed. And for the first time, my family was living inside the reality they'd built without my consent. The next chapter wouldn't be about fallout. It would be about what remained when nothing else could be taken from me. Because when control disappears, all that's left is choice. And this time, it was mine. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me paused. That instinct you develop when a long pattern is finally breaking and you can feel the snap coming. "Hello," I said. "This is attorney Michael Stern," a man said, calm, professional. "I'm calling regarding your grandmother, Ruth Brooks." My chest tightened. "Is she all right?" "She's fine," he said quickly. "This isn't a medical issue. She asked me to contact you directly." Directly. That word mattered. We scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon at his office in Burbank. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Lydia. I didn't even tell Naomi until after it was set. Some things don't need commentary until they exist. Michael Stern's office was modest. No grand lobby, no intimidation. Just clean lines, quiet efficiency, and the feeling of things being handled correctly. Ruth was already there when I arrived. She looked smaller than she had months ago, but sharper too. Clear-eyed, intentional. "Hannah," she said, smiling. "Thank you for coming." We sat. Michael closed the door. "This meeting concerns Ms. Brooks's estate planning," he began. "Specifically, recent revisions." Revisions. Ruth didn't look at me when she spoke next. "I waited," she said. "I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" I asked. "Of who would tell you the truth," she replied, "and who wouldn't." Michael slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it right away. "For years," Ruth continued, "your mother told me you were fine, that you liked helping, that you insisted." I felt my jaw tighten. When I asked questions, she went on. "I was told I didn't understand modern finances, that everything was handled." She turned to me then. "They handled you." I opened the folder. Inside was a revised will. Clear, explicit, dated 2 weeks earlier. The primary asset was a small commercial property Ruth had owned for decades. A quiet strip of offices she'd leased out steadily. No drama, no debt. It had always been assumed it would go to my mother. It wasn't. "I'm naming you executor," Ruth said, "and beneficiary of the property." I looked up sharply. "Ruth, I didn't ask for." "I know," she said. "That's why this is happening now." Michael spoke again. "Your grandmother's intent is very specific. The property will not pass through your parents. It will be placed in a trust with you as administrator." "And my parents?" I asked. "They will receive a fixed monthly disbursement," Ruth said calmly. "Enough to live, not enough to leverage." I understood immediately. This wasn't revenge. It was containment. "They won't be able to pressure you," Michael added. "Or her. The terms are locked." My throat tightened. "They built a future assuming your silence," Ruth said. "I'm building one that doesn't require it." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say much. "I don't want this to hurt them," I said finally. Ruth nodded. "It will, but not because of you, because of what they chose." When I left the office, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. This wasn't triumph. It was gravity. Systems correcting themselves. That night, my mother called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was brittle, controlled, afraid. "I know you were with her," she said. "I know what you're doing. You're trying to turn her against us." I saved the message, not as evidence, as closure. The next morning, Michael sent formal notices. My parents received them before noon. By 3 o'clock, my phone was ringing non-stop. My father, Lydia, unknown numbers. I didn't answer any of them. At 6, my mother showed up at my apartment. I didn't open the door. She knocked once, then harder. "Hannah," she called. "We need to talk." I stood on the other side of the door, listening. "This isn't fair," she said. "She's confused. You manipulated her." I spoke through the door, calm, even. "She wasn't confused," I said. "She was observant." Silence. Then, quieter. "You're destroying this family." "No," I replied. "I stopped letting you use me to hold it together." She cried then, not loudly, desperately. But I didn't open the door because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the last attempt to pull me back into a role that no longer existed. Eventually, she left. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. The next morning, Naomi calls. "I heard," she said simply. "It's done," I replied. "Yes," she said. "It is." What I didn't feel was guilt. What I felt was finality. The system had corrected itself, not because I demanded it. Because once truth enters a structure built on assumption, collapse isn't cruelty. It's inevitability. Only one chapter remained, not about them, about me. A year passed quietly. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned. The commercial property was transferred into the trust in late summer. I handled it the way I handle everything else now, methodically, without commentary. Rent continued to come in. Repairs were scheduled. Paperwork filed. Nothing dramatic happened. And that was the point. My parents adjusted, not gracefully, not quickly, but they adjusted. The stipend arrived on schedule every month. Fixed, non-negotiable. My mother complained, of course, to relatives, to friends, to anyone who would listen. She said it wasn't enough, that she'd been humiliated, that I'd taken something that should have been hers. No one corrected her. But fewer people encouraged her too. Lydia stopped calling entirely. I heard through Ruth that her marriage was strained, not because of money exactly, but because expectations had finally been exposed. When there's no outside source smoothing things over, people have to confront what's actually there. I didn't intervene. That was no longer my role. My father sent one email 6 months after the notices went out. It was short. I should have said something sooner. I didn't. That's on me. I replied with one sentence. "I'm taking care of myself now." He never wrote back. At work, the promotion became real. Not just a title, but authority. Decisions I made stayed made. Projects moved because I said they would. I noticed something else, too. I wasn't apologizing anymore. Not for being direct. Not for taking space. Not for saying no. I bought a small townhouse near the foothills that fall. Nothing extravagant. Just enough room to breathe. The day I signed the papers, I sat in my car afterward and let the engine idle. No one else's name was on the documents. No one else's future depended on what I'd just signed. That mattered more than I'd expected. Ruth passed away the following spring. I was with her in the final days. She was lucid enough to squeeze my hand and say, "You did right by yourself." I believed her. The funeral was restrained. My mother sat 2 rows ahead of me, perfectly dressed, eyes dry. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Some distances are healthier when they remain. Afterward, a woman I barely remembered from childhood approached me. "You're braver than you think," she said quietly. I didn't argue, because bravery wasn't what it felt like. It felt like alignment, like my actions finally matched what my body had known for years. Here's what I learned. If love requires you to disappear, it isn't love. If family only functions when you overgive, it isn't family. And if setting a boundary makes you the villain, it means the system needed a villain to survive. I didn't get revenge. I didn't expose anyone publicly. I didn't raise my voice. I stopped participating. And that was enough to flip the power completely. What I walked away with wasn't money or property or leverage. It was choice. The ability to decide how my life would look without factoring in someone else's comfort. If you've ever been the one who pays, the one who smooths things over, the one everyone relies on but never protects, know this: you're allowed to stop. You don't owe anyone your silence, and choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's the beginning of everything that comes next. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and share what boundary changed your life. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe and stay with me.